Hello, welcome to the October 1st, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that as the live stream goes on, I may soon get behind the live chat. I will try to do my best to catch up, and we will go through all the questions asked chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if we could include which version of Cubase you're running. Also, if you could mention if which version of Cubase, whether it's 11, 12, or 13. Also, which level. So if you are running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful. And which operating system. After the live stream ends, a couple hours after, we should have the index of all topics with timestamps pinned to the top of the comments field for a reference, so you can quickly navigate to a particular topic. Also, if you want to navigate topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create the website. You can kind of type your question and search through the more than 34,000 topics that we've discussed. As we are also giving thanks, we want to give a special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate that. Also give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, so the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. Let me clear my throat. And if you are watching live or watching on a replay, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world joining into the Club Cubase live streams. Just a quick note, it was so wonderful to see so many people on the Zoom social meetup on Friday. So wonderful discussions as always. I look forward to that every month. So with that, we will go ahead and begin. So first question we see... Hello, could you explain what is the microphone symbol in an Apple top display menu bar, Mac OS 14? For once Cubase 13 is opened, Cubase 12 opens on the same system. There is no little symbol of Mac Studio. So I think, and I don't think I have it on my Mac OS, but I think what it is you could turn on and off permissions, like security permissions for the operating system. So I think that's what it does. I don't think that, once it's enabled and Cubase is communicating with your audio interface, that you have to worry about it. But that's just I think it's a quick access to the security settings if you need to access it. So it may pop up when Cubase has been chosen to have access to the microphone. And so I think that's what that particular setting is. All right, so we see from Zephaniah, hey Greg, how do you add delay on a 2-bar part of a vocal track without using another track or duplicating the track using Cubase 13 Pro on PC? Okay, so let's say I have a vocal track here. I'll just turn this into one audio file here. Okay, so I just want to put a delay on just this little section here. So there's a couple ways of approaching it. One is, so you say you don't want it without using another track. So if we wanted to add there's a couple different ways to approach this. So let's say if I wanted to come over to my channel settings and I want to put a delay on, so we'll just come here, put a quarter note delay. So we could automate this particular channel. So let's say, okay, I'm just going to take my mix settings. I'm going to click on W here. So we're going to write the parameters of the automation. So say, I'll just solo this, and I'll turn up the, so let's say the next phrase I want, I'll take it off let's say this next phrase I want to automate. So I'll just take the delay. And then I'll automate the mix going down. And now when we listen to it again, so we'll go to rewind. So like when we start at the beginning, all right, this phrase will have no delay on it. So we have a delay kind of. So now our delay will be automated down, and no delay there. Now we could also kind of do the same thing if we use an effects channel track. So let's say, okay, I want to get rid of, turn this plugin off. I'm going to add an effects channel to the selected channel, which will be our delay. So we'll just put this on a ping pong delay. So, and if we wanted to, instead of the mix knob, what we could do now at this point is I'll turn my mix up, and we'll go to our channel settings, and we could automate the particular channel right here. So you've added an effects channel track. So I'm going to go to my destinations, and we're going to say, okay, I want to go to my ping pong delay. So as I'm going to turn this on, I'm going to automate the channel. So we click on W for write automation. So as we do this, so I want to delay in this part. Then I take the delay send down. Now this part won't delay. Now if I want to delay on the next part, now this next part won't be delayed. So that's how you could do it. Also, a third approach would be just to come over here, and let's say if I don't have a delay on a particular, I don't have an effects delay loaded as an effects channel or as an insert, I could just take a particular selection here and say, okay, I'm going to take this. We can hit the F7 key or go to your audio menu to direct offline processing. We could choose our plugins, and we go to delay. So I want a mono delay of a quarter note. And so now that we clicked auto apply, when I play this back, this delay will be rendered into the file. And now this won't have the delay because we didn't select that with the range tool. But if I want this to have the delay, again, I could just come over here. So now this will be dry. This one will be delayed. And then if you wanted to, at any time, if you wanted to remove these, you could just delete all of those even after saving the project. So there's 3 different ways of kind of doing delays on a particular track. Let me know if that works for your workflow. All right, we see Peter from Montreal. Great to see you on the meetup on Friday. All right, so we have Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset with Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. He says Pennsylvania is looking mighty like autumn around there. Front yard's filling up with leaves. Yeah, it's starting to feel a bit autumn-like in Virginia as well. All right, we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, always great to see Jazz Dude. We see Fly V on from Winnipeg. Great to see you on the live stream. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, Tim K and his cat Buddy are sending, or they're waving. Buddy, his cat is waving hello to my cat Steven and Stella, Mark Raven's dog, and any other pets. All right, so we see Andras Lomstein. How can I make a scored lead sheet with chords and title and a composer and a page and print it? Okay, so let's go take a quick example. So we're going to kind of start off with just almost a blank MIDI part just for the score. So I'm going to come over here. Sorry, let me get rid of that. Okay, so I'm going to select like all the events fit into this amount of time. I'm going to add a MIDI track. So we'll come here, it could be an instrument track, doesn't matter. I'm going to create an event that's the length, and we could call this lead sheet. And if I want, I'm just going to hold down the Control or Command key, which will rename the event. I'm going to take the guitar part here, drag it to the chord track. I'm going to open this in my score editor. So we have a blank stave. I want to see this as it's going to be on the page, so we're going to switch it to page mode. And now what I want to do is go to my score menu, and we will see advanced layout, and we'll say show chords. And let's just come over here. We'll go to our symbols. So if we now want to put in, let's say text. All right, and now if we want to, like, change the font size, we could do that. Let me just open up the right hand side here. So let's say, okay, I want to change the font size to, and again, we'll just come over here, say, okay, let's put in my friend's name wrong. So now we have our lead sheet laid out for us, and we could have the text, and we could center the text elements and all that good stuff. But you could just, so once again, just create kind of a blank MIDI event, and then you could just, once you have, open up the score editor, go to advanced layout and say show chord track, and that's from the chords from the chord track that were automatically generated from the audio or MIDI part, and then you could have your lead sheet laid out for you. All right, Conpa Pam asks, hi Greg, I'm using Cubase 13 Pro on Windows. How can I color my mixer like that? All right, so let's look at my mix console. So once we have kind of our mixer laid out for us, and you see this usually isn't kind of red. Let me just show a different project here. So let's say if I open up a project, I think Millard had a question about that. So if you want the mix console faders to have the track colors, what you need to do, so if we look at this, we could see kind of the colors. If you go to the preferences, and we'll go to user interface, we'll say track and mix console channel colors. We could say mix console channels. So once that is turned on, we hit apply. So right now, this may be the default setting, which could be not as exciting, but go to preferences. Again, user interface, track and mix console channel colors, and come right over there to the mix console channels, hit apply, and then you could adjust the color strength if you want, or if you want to put that in the middle to make it a little more subdued, you could do it like that. So let me know if that's what you want to see. Okay, Millard Brown asks, is there any way MediaBay to browse all available presets, chords for the trigger pads in Halion 7? Also, can I create a folder for user presets? So I don't think that the chord pads, the chords and the trigger pads are going to be accessible in MediaBay. But let's go ahead and just take a quick look, make sure. Okay. Okay, so let me just... Okay, so we have some chords here. Let's see if we could save the preset. Okay, so now we have a preset for Millard Brown here. So say for Millard, and let me just take a look. We'll open up MediaBay. So here we could see like the Halion presets. I don't think that's going to pop up in MediaBay. But we'll take a look. All right, so we don't see it in the main MediaBay. Let me see if we could find it within Halion 7 MediaBay. I'm not sure if it's those chord pad presets will automatically show up. So we could have like our, so the chord, because generally the MediaBay is going to be presets for the instrument itself, and this is kind of a preset of a subset of the instrument. But let me see. So if we have that loaded, yeah, so I don't think that's going to be accessible in MediaBay, but once you have the chord pads open, you can access it right there. And then second part of this question, can I create a folder for user presets? So, Cubase is doing that for you already. So let's say if we make a user preset, we'll go to the Halion here and we'll save a preset. Okay. So now we want to go to our MediaBay. And we can see that it's going to go into our user content. Let's say we come over to Halion 7. And then we just got to rescan this. All right, so let's say now that these are our user presets, what we could do is just kind of right click, and then we could say reveal in Finder, and we can see that this is going to be the folder where all the Halion 7 presets will be. So if we wanted to just access that, again, just right click, reveal in Finder. And this way, when you go from like a Cubase 12 to a Cubase 13, since it's saved in kind of a neutral, non-program specific location, that it's automatically recalled and is available to be seen directly right from other versions that access MediaBay, other programs, Cubase, Halion Sonic, etc. So it will put it into kind of a user presets folder for you. And so again, from MediaBay, just right click and you could reveal in Finder or reveal in Explorer, either way. All right, so we have Spa Dogs checking in from Canada. Great to see you back. Always wonderful to have Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. All right. Okay, so Rob from Tarpon Springs asks, is there a way to have the chord track play chords which are built for guitars as opposed to for piano? All right, so let's say if we are auditioning chords here, and I'll just go back to different project. Okay, so if we have a chord track, okay, and let's say if we're auditioning the chord track on this particular Rhodes, okay, so let's say now if I wanted the voicing, so we go to the chords here, and we could choose, so we're going to select the chord track, and right now we have the voicing set for piano, but we could also set the voicings for guitar. So you notice that the D is going to be pitched higher than the E minor chord. So just select the chord track, and then when you see the voicings category here, you could have piano chords. You could have basic chords, so like 3 notes, or if you wanted it to be guitar chords. So that's how you could switch between piano, basic, or guitar chord voicings for the chord track. All right, so we have Morningstar Trance DJs saying hello from Orlando, Florida. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from GTMM Music, says Greg the Legend. Greetings from Bucharest, Romania, and thank you for running this amazing podcast. Well, thank you for the kind words, and we're glad to have you on. The live stream is only as good as all the wonderful questions we get and the wonderful community that's involved. All right, so we see Timothy Zick says, yo, regards from Poland. Cubase is the real, nothing but Cubase. It's great. And we see Benny from Cubase. All right, so we have the artist known as Love, just saying, Greg, thank you for all you do. And we see, he says, and he wants people to please hit the like button. All right, we see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Tony DeCerci, who's a new recruit from Studio One, so congratulations. Welcome to the Steinberg family. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we have a question from, it's Bim Bim Doen Hein. Hi, Greg. How to insert VST real time on the input and record it? Okay, so if we have, so when we go to our mix console, we may notice that we could have input channels. So when I have an input channel, they'll often have like a red fader. So let me go ahead and just add. So when I have my input channel here, we can see, okay, I have this defined. Now that we have it set up in our project, as we scroll over, we could choose to see input channels. So this is our input channel. It usually shows up in the left part of the mixer. So if we want to have an audio track, and let's say we come right over here, we add an audio track, and it's now set up to go through our particular inputs. So we'll say stereo in 1. We'll add the track. So if we place an effect as an insert on this track, so let's say I want to do like a guitar amp. So we'll go to our distortion and we go to the VST amp rack. So now when the signal comes in, the signal from the input channel goes to the audio track, and that audio track will play the plugin. So it's not recorded with this plug-in sound. It's going to be played, it's going to be recorded dry, and that dry signal is going to be run through the guitar amp. Now, when you want to actually record the guitar amp into the audio file itself, what you would do is instead of placing the insert on the audio channel, we place the insert on the input channel. So now that we come over here, we go to our VST amp rack. Now that it's on the input channel, this particular plugin will actually record through the plugin on the input channel, so that when you record the guitar, it's going to be recorded and you can't take it off at that point. It's basically the guitar sound. The guitar amplifier sound is embedded with the audio as it's being recorded to the track. So to record the effects, place it on the input channels. You'll notice it'll have the red fader caps, and then it will automatically be recorded. Now just make sure that when you go to like record a vocal, that it's like on, if you're using the same physical input, that you actually just turn that particular plugin off. But if you wanted to record with compressors, EQs, amp modelers, stuff like that, place it into the input channel if you want those sounds to be embedded into the project, into the audio file and burned in. All right, wonderful to see Gareth checking in from Spain. All right, Flyvy asked, this is such an easy question, but I don't know what the R and W buttons do. All right, so we can think of the R and W buttons as read and write automation. So if I have my channel open, and let's say I just move different areas, I move my EQ, I turn on my send, I adjust my send, I go to play it back, that none of those changes. So we'll start here, and we'll open up the channel. None of the changes that I just did will be recalled. So when I put on the W, think of W as for write. Like we're going to write automation. So we're going to come right over here. So W is write and R is read. So read the automation. So I open this up. Now that I have write turned on, I move the fader, I adjust the EQ, I adjust the send levels, I turn it on and off. At this point, when we go back to the beginning and we have read turned on, everything that I just did is automated. If I don't want those changes to occur in that channel, I would take read off, and then it's not going to read the written automation. So W for write automation, basically to record the automation, R to read or to play back the automation. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, wonderful to see Neil Conway checking in from Oregon in the U.S., Pacific Northwest. All right, so we have Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Great to see you again. His question is, what is the easiest and fastest way to copy an insert with its automation from one track to another? Okay. All right, so let's say if we have insert automation, let me just add in our audio track here. Okay, so let's say we have audio 1, audio 2. So let's put an insert on both of the channels. Okay, so let's say if I want to now come over, so let's say we have this plugin. I'm going to automate this plugin. Okay, so we go back and we see this automation on the plugin. Okay, so if we want, so let's say we want to, so we could just say, okay, I want to take this particular track and let's go ahead and we'll open up the automation panel. So I'm going to say show used automation. Okay, so right now we're going to have this on read. I'm on the wrong. Here, I'll just. Okay, so we see the tube automation here. So if we wanted to copy this particular plugin, just hold down the Alt or Option key, and then we could drag that particular automation. At this point, we could go to Audio 02, and let's look at our automation. So we say, okay, let's go to More. I want to go to my Inserts, and we have Insert 2. All right, so in this we had Mix, Output, and Drive. All right, so I'm going to say, let's go to our Mix. And then we could just kind of open up. So we have our mix. Let's have our, And we can say inserts.tube. So we're assigning the same parameters. All right, and now what I want to do is say, okay, I want to, we could select all the events on this track, copy, come right here. So we have our mix. I'm going to do a paste at origin, Alt-Option plus V. Again, right click here, select all events on that lane, copy. Sorry, I will copy, Alt V, and again, select all, copy, and Alt V. So, and now make sure that these are set up to read. So at that point, everything will automatically just be matched up. So, open up the automation lanes, find the parameters, right click in the automation to select all the events, copy that, and then go down to the other track, and you could do Alt V, which will be paste at origin, and that way you can paste it at the original time as opposed to the position based on the playhead position. And then you could, just simply drag this plugin over with the Alt or Option key, and that will drag the plugin. But, the existing automation for that doesn't live with the plugin. It lives on the track. So that's why we need to copy those particular tracks independently. And I don't think we could do multiple automation points, but I'll give it a shot here just in case. So let's see if I hold down Shift. Yeah, so do kind of one track at a time. That's how you could do it. Okay, so we have Leon saying hello from Belgium. Thanks for joining us. Great, so we have Goonie saying hello to everyone. We see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Great to see you on. All right, Michael Pierce, great to see you on. Thanks for sharing your video of your Mapex drum recordings. It looked really cool. Sounded great. Congratulations on. And he's saying hello from a rain-covered Britain. So yeah, we have lots of rain here today in Washington, D.C. area. All right, Robert Daisy Webb asks, hi Greg, how you doing? Lately, my insert effects don't open up right after selecting which plugin effect anymore. Any idea why this happens? All right, so there is a preference for this. So let's say if we open up an insert here, and by default, when we go to open an insert, the interface pops up. All right, now there's a preference. So let's find it quickly. So I think it might be under plugins. Okay, so right here, you'll see the preference under the VST section, under plugins, open effect editor after loading it. So if that is unchecked, when I go to open up a particular plugin, so let's say I want like one of the Pultec style EQs, we don't see the interface open. But if we have that preference enabled, again, preferences, VST to plugins, open effect editor after loading it, that now when I come over and we load a plugin, the plugin GUI opens automatically. So again, check that preference. It might be under preferences or settings if you're running different Mac OS versions, and just say open effect editor after loading it. Make sure that's checked. So we see from Andres Lomstein, says, thank you, Greg. You're welcome. And Compa Pam just says, yes, thanks. All right, so we have Steven in Sarasota. Great to see you on. All right, we have Dwarkadish, or Dwarkadish. Says, how do you use a plate delay? So there's many of the reverb plugins will have kind of like a plate delays sounds. So it's generally an algorithm for like an algorithmic reverb. But if you wanted to have a great plate, let's come over and we'll just solo, let's say, our drums, if we want like this drum loop to go through a plate. So I'm just going to right click, add track. And I'll just put this, I'm going to hit Alt Option plus P, and we'll have that cycle and loop. So now when we open up the channel, I want to add, let's say, an effect send. We could do it as an insert effect as well. So I'm going to open up the reverb. So if we wanted to come over the two big reverbs, if we want algorithmic, you have revelation. And there will be kind of plates on here. If you wanted to search for a name, we can say, okay, let's get to our plate. Sorry. All right, so now we open this up, we could have less. So, plate reverb, basically you would send the signal to almost like a metal or steel plate. So that's one way of doing it. Another plate that you could use is really good is just using the convolution reverb. So if I wanted to come here, let's go to reverence. And reverence is basically works kind of dealing with samples. So they actually will like sample the reverb. And here there's a number of plates that come with this. So you may notice, so if you want like a plate hall. So again, if you just kind of type in a plate, you can say, okay, I just want to try it. So, and plates over time will sound different. They do evolve. Here we have a reverse plate. So there's a number of ways to get different plate reverbs, either with the reverence that we just saw or utilizing the Revelation plugin. All right, so we have from Command Beats, in the piano roll, is it possible to light up the keys while playing a melody? All right, so let's come over here. So, and if I switch this, let's just pop up to my Rhodes patch here. Okay, so when I double click, so we can see which keys are being pressed. If we look right here on the, so not the entire key lights up, but if I play, we can see that the keys are lit up, indicating that they are the ones that are being played. So you could just look right there. So the whole key doesn't light up, but you could get an idea of exactly which key is being played in real time. All right, so you see the question I may have misunderstood about plate reverb. It says how to use the plate delay. So generally there aren't plate delays, but if you wanted to, again, let's just come over here. I think that's some of the plate reverbs, you know, so if you want kind of like more of a vintage echo, you know, we could come over. So let's say I come here and so you know, generally like older echoes would be more based on tape. So, but I think if we come over here, that we could have a plate delay, that we might be able to do something in the reverence. So let's look at the plate. So here's a plate with a slap, with the tap delay. But if you're looking more for like vintage delays, you know, check out if you go into the multi-tap delay. So we could kind of treat this. All right, so let's say I want to make this maybe eighth note delay. All right, now as we work with that, we could choose kind of like if we want it to be more digital modern, if we want it to be like a digital vintage, where you may hear a little more grit as the delay goes on. Or we could choose for this to be a tape delay. So here you'll hear the high end gradually go. So you could, but generally most of the time the plate is going to be used for reverbs and for vintage reverbs, and a tape, it was often used for, you can think of like the space echo, where it would be an actual reel-to-reel tape that would be kind of generating the delays, and that's what you could kind of do with the tape delay there. So, sorry for misunderstanding your question. Okay, all right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just get it. All right, so we see from Michael Bruning, if I switch from chord pads to patterns, example Dreamy, EP ARPs, can I drag those patterns into my project? All right, so I think, so let's say we come over here, we go to the chord pads, and I'm going to activate the chord pads so that we can trigger them. Move my phone charger out of the way here. All right, so I want to come over now and set it up for patterns. And let me just get the same pattern here. Okay, Dreamy EP ARPs. Okay, so let's say we have. All right, so once we have that pattern loaded, kind of the intention is not when we drag it, it's going to be kind of the block chord. So we listen to this. All right, but if we want the pattern, what we want to do is to actually just simply place it into record and then play. So now I come here. And I'm just going to have this not follow the... So now what that has done is automatically, so while you can't drag it, if you just hit record and play, that at that point it will automatically just be recorded for you. So that's all you have to do. So just put it into record, but dragging will just do the kind of the block chord pattern. And then when you actually play and just record in real time, that will be converted as if you kind of played the entire arpeggiated pattern. All right. Let's see, Spa Dogs just ask, when will we see Cubase 14? So, generally we don't pre-announce versions, but, when it's ready and it's all tested, so that's when when it's done, that's when Cubase 14 will be released. All right, wonderful to see Jan from Cubase Index, and you don't have to apologize for being late, but your only punishment is to hit the like button. Okay, so we see Balsa just saying, hi Greg, I just want to say that the combined selection tool is amazing, changed my workflow for the better. Only frustration is zooming with the control plus middle scroll wheel is a bit wonky. All right, so let's say if I come over here and just hit control. So I've never really kind of had a problem with finding that to be wonky in natures, but let's say if I'm here but there's also, another setting which could have an impact is, I think sometimes if we zoom, let's say if I repeat this a number of times, all right, and if this was all kind of one event, so let's say if I bounced this quickly, okay, so I think that, when we come over here, we could zoom. So let's say if I'm holding down my control. So, but there is, I think, a preference. So let's say if we get to the preferences, if it's wonky, check this preference. So let's come over here to zoom. And you could do a use selection start as the zoom anchor. So usually I have that unchecked. So let's say I have this event selected and it's 140 bars long, right? So now when I zoom, we could basically use kind of the event start. So let's say if I'm here and we start to, let me just, okay, so let's say I'm right here and I zoom, so you could just check this one particular preference. So we could say use selection start as the zoom anchor or not. And now we could kind of just zoom where the anchor will be like right here where the cursor is, as opposed to the start of the event. So check the setting, try toggling the settings of this particular preference and see if that makes a difference. I found the zoom to kind of work as expected for me. All right. Ronnie B asks, hi Greg's greeting from Belgium. I would like to see something to explode chords to different track from the MIDI view, not always switch to score view to have the explode option. Can you convey this? I think that we can kind of do it utilizing using the logical editor. Let's see if we can show it to you here quickly. All right, so let's say if I come here to this part, and we'll go to project, let's get to here, and I'll just say we'll do chords to MIDI. Okay, so let's say we have a number of voices here. All right, so I think what we could do is if we go to the MIDI logical editor, we could say that we want to extract to track. I'll just put this track at the very bottom for now. All right, and then what we want to do is, let's see if we can remove that. We'll say context variable equal to lowest note in chord. All right, let me just so let me just see if I could just say extract to track, and we'll say position in chord track. All right, and then we could just say, okay, I want the minor and I'll say context variable. We want to do equals to position in chord part. So we can say the major or minor third. I could take this. So that way we could say, okay, let's take the fifths, the sevenths, the thirds. So we can kind of do it with a project with the MIDI logical editor events and choose to extract a track. I realize it may be faster still to use the score editor, but you can do it with the MIDI logical editor as well. But I'll pass it along as feedback. All right, Irving Novello says, hi from Mexico, Greg. Is there a shortcut to see the inserts mix console on the arrange window with the option and F13? I can see the faders, but I want to go straight to the inserts view. Is there a way? All right, so if we're on the mix console window and I want to switch between inserts, sends, and the faders, you can just hit the page up and page down keys, and that will allow you to navigate between the different sections in the mix console. So page up, page down. So no fancy keyboard shortcut that has to be defined. Once you have that in, then you could just page up, page down. So let me know if that works for you, Irving. Thanks for joining the live stream. All right, so we have the Dung producer. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. Says hello from says Jean Chow. Welcome, Music Vietnam. Thanks for joining us from Vietnam. All right, so wonderful to see Randy Lee from Texas, Dallas area. All right, Gareth says Yon Demand. All right, so we see from Cybernetic Music, says Cubase Pro 13 is the best DAW ever, best of the best. I think it's pretty good too. All right, so we see from Michael Bruning again, says the 4 notes in your chord track are played at once, but I want them to be played as patterns, i.e. dreamy EP arps. Is this possible? So I think we covered that, but let me know if not. Also, let's say if we have the Rhodes part here, another trick that you could do is, let's say I have my chord pads set up. So here's another thing that we could do. I'll just solo just. All right, I'll just take this out of. All right, so at that point, what I could do is actually just kind of take this particular event here. So let's say I have these 2 measures, right? And I have this pretty pattern. If we go to like a MIDI insert effect, such as Apache SX, go to the sequencer page, and I could just drag that loop in. And now as I play this particular track, we could just have this particular arpeggiator trigger so that we can just play and then we could just record. So once we move this line here, this red line, this means that the plugins above it will be recorded. So as I just record right in, and at that point we could choose just to have the actual chord track recorded in real time, but you could just hit record and just kind of play and you should be fine. All right, so we see Daniel from Croatia says he's got cola and Pringles. Let's go. All right, sounds good. And he wants me to teach him stuff. All right, so we see from Santoso, Nehemia, how to get colorful mixer. And again, if we just get to the mix console here, what we want is just to go, as we showed earlier, preferences, to user interface, to track and mix console channel colors. And right now we see the mixer is kind of bland, gray. So once we have mix console channels selected, that preference, hit apply, and then you get all the pretty colors in the mixer. All right, so we see Soren checking in from Sweden. All right, so you see Michael Pierce did a project for Mapex Drums. Says, now, when's Yamaha going to come visit? They have a really nice studio in Hamamatsu. They have an anechoic chamber and everything. But I'll let them know that you're available. All right, you see Michael Teams is distributing his virtual ice cream. So you see from Quena Edelfine, what additional Cubase plugins do I need for my mix? I would say that for all of your mixing needs, that the plugins that come with Cubase should be able to meet almost any mixing need quite capably. You know, if you required a third-party plugin, it could be because you're kind of used to its workflow, or it's a different flavor, like Coke versus Pepsi. But I think that the plugins that come with Cubase are incredibly capable and broad. So I don't think you really need many additional plugins. See, Robert Daisy Webb says, and as always, Greg helped me out. Thanks. I'm glad to be able to help. See, Michael Pierce just says, reverence is in every mix I do pretty much. All right, so we see Val checking in from Vienna as Y42. Thanks for joining us. All right, let me just... All right, Millard Brown just saying in general he finds Cubase native plugin to be very high quality and useful. All right. All right, great to see Matt Elston on. See Millard Brown just asking if everything is okay with Greg. So I think, yeah, I'm doing fine. Not sure if that's referring to me. All right, so we see Daniel just says, do I get a piano just with the Cubase 13 Pro? I want to work with stock stuff to minimize the confusion. So yeah, you get lots of pianos. So even if you wanted to, you know, and they'll be inside of Halion Sonic. So if you want typical kind of... So if you just even kind of type in grand, you could just come over. I think there's like a warm grand piano that's quite nice as a default piano to work with. And if you want like a S90 ES, kind of a Yamaha piano, there's that sound as well. So if you want a Yamaha S90 ES piano. And then even if you want it like a really nice kind of different flavor, which comes in really handy for lots of different types of pianos. You could get into like Verve as well. So let's say, and that's kind of a piano where you could take piano sounds and kind of blend it with different like synth textures. So it's a felt piano. So in here you could choose all of your different textures that you want. So you can say, okay, I want analog strings. And when we come over here, we can say, okay, how much of, I want the mod wheel to bring that in. But this is like just a really nice piano for fitting, it's not like a typical kind of grand concert, concert grand piano, but you could come over here and then select your piano. But this is a piano that fits really well in a mix, so you get lots of great piano choices with Cubase. All right, wonderful to see Perti Komenen. All right. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop says, how do you participate in the Friday Zoom sessions? It says, I clicked the link last Friday and put in the password, and I was not able to get in. Sorry if you weren't able to get in. So it's only like, we only do it for a couple of hours. I guess if you put it in after the time, if we went for just about 2 hours, 45 minutes or so, almost 3 hours. So, but generally it's going to be the last live stream of the month is when we do it. And if you want to email me, I'd be happy to send you the password or the link in advance. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family, myself, 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. That's very kind. We appreciate it. Okay, Michael Teams asks, howdy, wondering about why some arpeggiators in Halion 7 start without me. I must have something turned on or off somewhere. Any ideas? So let me know if you're finding it on particular patches. So, but let's say if once you're in Halion 7, let's say if we have, I will just come over here. So let's say we want to take like this particular Okay, so let's come over here. So let's see if I open this up with the cello. So one area to look for arpeggios in Halion 7 specifically is if we come over to the flexphraser. So let's say if we want to click on the plus sign, I think we could access it from here. It might be under the MIDI modules. Okay, so go to the MIDI modules, and some of the presets may just have a flexphraser built in. So try if you go under, let's say, more of the, so if you're looking, so at your patch, if you go to edit and then to like the MIDI mod. Some of the patches may just have flexphraser turned on, and if you're loading up other patches, and there's all sorts of great kind of so even if you want to come here to strings, so I'm just holding one chord down. So let's say I wanted to switch this to like a sustain patch. So check again if you go to edit, and then to the MIDI modulation, make sure that you don't have the flexphraser turned on. So that's probably some of the patches will utilize flexphraser. So try turning that off and see if that solves it for you, Michael. Okay, Balsa asks, hi Greg, can you show how now anything can be an input for an audio track when an audio track is an input for another? Can we choose passes on or not to insert effects, pre-post fader, etc.? Okay, so let's say I want to come here. Let's activate my flex phrase again. All right, so just do quick. Okay, so I'm going to create, and let's say on this track I want to have an EQ. And I'll put, let's say, a reverb. Let me make that by a send here. And I'll make it a larger hall. All right. So we'll say a large live stage. All right, so if we wanted to actually record the output of this as audio, what I could do is I'm going to add an audio track. So we'll come to the cello parts, add an audio track, and I'm going to set its input, and we'll say connect to bus, and I want it to be my cello track. So we'll say rack instruments, track instruments, let me see. Okay, so we'll say our cello track. So we're going to add an audio track here. All right, so I'm going to just come over here and I'm just going to record the audio of these two parts. And I'll open up the channel settings. So let's say first I want it to be dry. So I'm going to come here. And again, we'll place this into record. Okay, so now I want to add, let's say, the EQ from the cello. Sound like some 1985 Kate Bush Fairlight stuff. And now I want to come over here and add the effect. All right, so now we've placed those two tracks. So I recorded the live output of all of those changes, and the audio of that was just captured in this particular track. So after a while, we're going to hear the EQs come in, and we're sweeping up the filters. Then we're going to hear the reverb start to kick in. The reverb, I think, should be coming in next here. Okay, and if we actually sent the reverb to a group, because reverb is actually being sent out, but if I did a reverb as an insert or sent it to a group, that would automatically be captured as well. So because the reverb was not going out to the instruments, it wasn't part of the instrument track. So, but that's how you could kind of automate and capture all those changes from different instrument sounds. So let me know if I misunderstood, Balsa, or if that's what you wanted to do. All right, so we see Michael Teens says his new solo LP is hopefully coming out by December, so that's great. Okay. See Irving Novello just says that works. Thank you, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer Sr. on, says greetings from finally have internet back in Bealville, North Carolina. Pleased that that was all you lost. So we're glad you're well. Hope you didn't have much damage from the storm. I think you're east from where most of the damage we see is, but I'm sure you got a lot of rain. Okay, Michael Teams has granted Brian Sawyer Sr. 1 gallon of fresh strawberry ice cream. Sounds great. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped ahead. Okay, Jazz Dude is just saying, asks, maybe Greg can share some words of and on flexphraser versus arpeggiators like Apache. So flex phrasers, as we see, are going to be internal to Halion or Halion Sonic. So as soon as we come over here, so as we come over with our cello, and I'll just take the processing off here. So conceptually, kind of the same things. So Halion and Halion Sonic. So when we come over here, we could choose different patterns that we want, and always use different patterns. Like you know, because I have a string part doesn't mean it has to be strings. Let's take our cellos and do like a funk organ and see how it sounds. So you could try stuff like that, and let's say if I want to even just utilize that on a short, let's say staccato. So you wouldn't necessarily think of having a funk organ part that's doing strings, but always do that. Now, as we're doing this, we say, I want to add more swing to the playback of the arpeggio, or I want this to be based on eighth notes instead, or eighth note triplets. Now, once I do this, what I could do is actually, if I wanted to get this particular phrase, so when I play a chord or trigger a chord from the chord pads, this will generate this, but I can't record the arpeggio from the MIDI notes are being generated by the arpeggio out to the sequencer. So, but what I can do is we'll see this little record button. So now when I could now stop recording, and I could drag the MIDI event out. So now we have that little phrase. So if I turn off my flexphraser, so again, flexphraser is going to be only working inside of, so we'll come over here. So that's only working inside of Halion. But let's say I wanted to use it with an instrument that's outside of Halion. This is where we could use a MIDI plugin like the Arpeggi. So when I come over, let's select this track. I'm going to go to, and we have Arpeggi, which is kind of a simple plugin interface for this. So let's say we go to MIDI insert, and I could have an Arpeggi. So as I play, and here we could choose the note length. So let's say I want it to be 30-second notes, so it's more staccato. Let's say I want it to be. So we could say, okay, I want this to go down, or I want it to be random. So I hold down a chord. Now if I wanted to record the output of this, again, we would go to our MIDI inserts, and we see this line, and I drag that down. So now when I go to hit record, the arpeggiator instead of just recording block chords, the arpeggiator is what is recorded. So this way it's almost as if I had played all of the different parts. Now so that's kind of the more simplistic of the MIDI arpeggiators, but let's say I like that particular pattern again. If we go to the Arpeggi SX, now I could take this pattern from that was generated from the flexphraser. So if I actually wanted to play and record and capture that, once we open up the Arpeggio SX, I could go to the sequencer and drag that down. So now we could so I'm going to just hit record here. I won't record the audio. So let's say so now it's as if I had painstakingly recorded all that because I don't have good keyboard skills. And now that I could kind of interact with that and record it in real time. And I could accent different notes. So if I actually wanted to record the output of the arpeggiation in real time, we could just move this line down, and then what's above the line gets recorded. So, so again, the flexphraser is going to be specifically for using it within Halion. And if you wanted to use arpeggios for other purposes, if it's a simple arpeggio, you could use Arpeggi, or more complex, you could use the Arpeggi SX, where you could drag and drop patterns in and use that as the basis for the arpeggios. All right. See Timothy Zick says regards from Poland, great lessons. Thanks for the kind words. Michael Teams is on fire with ice cream today. All right, so we have DJ Showcase says, hi Greg, long-time Cubase user since about 7. For some reason, I can't recall how do I change the visibility into mix console in the lower zone without affecting the other mix consoles. All right, so if we want to just come over here, so again, if we have the mix console selected here and page up and page down, so page up, page down. So that allows us to change it here, but that's not going to affect when you go page up, page down, because all the different elements are in the mix console here. So the large full screen mixers will be independent of what we see here. So, but let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we have Fadi from Egypt asks, how to activate scrub feature in Cubase and talkback mic setup, please? Okay, so if we wanted to scrub, so this would have to be an audio source. So we have the play tool here. So if I wanted to play. Now if I wanted to scrub, if we go to our play tool where it looks like the little speaker, we can now switch it to a scrub. And if you wanted to just kind of zoom in, find a spot for the edits. You can do that as well. So just, that's how you could activate the scrub tool. So it's going to be, you can switch between like your scrub tool and the speaker tool right here. So just kind of click, and then you could choose which mode you're in. So play, and now scrub. All right, and the next question is how to activate the talkback mic setup. So the talkback mic is going to be part of the control room. So if we go to your studio menu to audio connections, we'll go to your audio connections. Let's go to the control room. And here we could have a talkback mic. So let's say I want to use input 1 of my microphone right there. So when I want to communicate, we would go to the control room, and then all we would have to do is activate talkback. And we could set up key commands or utilize the MIDI remote to turn talkback on and off. So if I wanted to activate that with the MIDI remote from my nano control, I'll just come over here. And then let me just get to my, and then you could just activate it right from there. You'll see, I'll show you where the command is. If you go to your key commands, you could just search talkback and you'll find it in the control room section. Talkback on and off, and you can assign a key command if you want. All right, wonderful to see Capt Energy Music checking in from Pennsylvania. See, John Costigan couldn't get past the opening view on Zoom. Sorry about that. We missed having you there. Okay, so we see GTMM Music says, hi Greg, if not too time consuming, could you quickly show us how we can apply a certain effect to several tracks at the same time? Thanks in advance. Emmanuel from here using Cubase 12 Pro on Windows 11. All right, so say I want to take a number of drum tracks, like a multi-track drum scenario. Okay, so if I wanted to, put, so we go to our mix console here. So let's say I want to take my drums. So if you see these 3 dots here, we could activate what's called Q-Link. So now if I wanted to come over, I'm going to select a number of different channels. So I just hold down the shift key, select one. So now I could apply, let's say, go to modulation. So I want to put a chopper plugin on all of those tracks. So as an insert, this will change the levels. So now that I have Q-Link on all of the selected tracks, I can now put, let's say, a flanger on just those particular selected tracks. If we didn't want to do that, we could also just say, I want to take these tracks, and I could right click and we could say add an effects channel to these tracks. So I want it to be a reverb. So when we go to our effects ends, we can, so let me just select the tracks here first. So I'm going to take like my 2 snares and hi-hat, and I want to right click, add effects channels to the selected channels, and let's put a delay. So now those multiple tracks have the same aux send being utilized. Or if I wanted to come here, and another way that we could kind of do same thing, I wanted to take all of these particular tracks and I could select the range here, and we could go to offline processing. So I have multiple events selected. Let's add a plugin. Let's say a filter. So now that filter is applied to all of the selected events under the range tool. So whether you want to use the Q link to apply the same inserts, whether you want to select all the tracks, right click, add an effect send to all the selected tracks, or select regions or the entire tracks and do an offline processing, it's 3 different approaches for doing it. So let me know if that makes sense, is helpful, or if you need a 4th way. I'll revert this since I've destroyed the song pretty well. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has to pop out for a little while, and hopefully he'll be back with a carrot and coriander soup that he made yesterday. All right. So we want to wish everyone, we want everyone to wish Michael Teams a happy belated birthday that he had on Sunday. Hope you had a great day of celebration, Michael. All right, Michael Team says, okay, Greg, thanks for the tip on flexphraser. And Gareth says it's the revelation of the day. All right, so we have Avli Music Productions. Great to see you on. Is there a way to have more than 4 Q mixes and just be limited to the number of outputs we have? So currently, utilizing the control room, it is fixed to 4 Q mixes. And if you wanted to utilize more, you can use, you could set up group like outputs here. So let's say, okay, I wanted to. And while it doesn't have the same integration for control room, this would be more kind of like traditional console. But if we come to your audio connections, we can say, let's make more outputs. So I want to add, let's say, 3 more stereo outs. And then I could basically go to the sends here and say, okay, I want all of these to go to stereo out 2, which is a headphone mix. And now we could just come here, let's turn it on, and we could set the levels. Let's send all of these to stereo out 3. Turn it on. So while it's kind of not exactly the control room integration for TalkBack, you can use 8 of your aux sends for doing control room. So just use the aux sends to send it to the stereo out where the headphone output is connected. But when we're dealing with the control room integration, that's going to be 4 Q mixes there. Gareth calls it flexphraser. That's good. See, Millard Brown says, for crying out loud, I didn't hit the play button on the live stream. And of course, no streaming. Derp. we're glad you figured it out. So I was concerned. I was like, I thought I was doing okay. All right. Okay, so we see, says, hi Greg, question, how to hot swap an audio track to a different pre-configured audio track and maintain the original audio file? Okay, so let's say I have an audio track here. We'll make it a mono track. And this track has, let's say, sorry, I'll just, let's say a flanger on it would just make it obvious to hear. Okay, so let's say we're playing along here. So there isn't necessarily, I mean, I think you can accomplish what you want to do. So let's say we're playing along here, and I want to take the bass track. So if I just, so once I take this particular track, let's just pop over to arpeggiators, and I'll kind of match. But let's say I want all of the events here. I can just drag it to another track, and I'll do like a really nasty EQ. Get on the right track, that would help. So my audio files here, I could just, and even if I have like a million cuts and edits, I could just select the first one and shift double click, and then you could use a nudge down command to move it to another track. So let's say, okay, my bass is coming in, I want it on a different track. Or if you wanted to duplicate it, hold down the Alt or Option key. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish with hot swapping the tracks. But you could just copy the media, the audio from one track to another track that has different parallel processing. You can have it run in parallel or just run it separately. So again, if you want to maintain the original file, your original file will be here. So if my original file is here, or if you want the original file in place, just hold down the Alt or Option key. Then the original file plus the copied file with new processing. Okay. Let's see. Garrett says, remember to flex that like phraser. Right. Right. Daniel says, it's amazing how you remember where everyone is from. Makes me feel special every time. So it's nice to, like, when I do like in-person things, which I haven't done as much of, since COVID, it's always nice to talk to the people and just have a sense of where people are. So it makes it easier for me, and I feel like I'm actually talking to a person instead of, as my wife describes it, talking to my laptop. So all right, so we see from Gareth, how many gigabytes are the Iconica libraries? I think Iconica Sketch is around 5 or 6 gigs, but we'll go ahead and check just to make sure. So I'll go to the Steinberg download assistant. So Iconica Sketch you get with Cubase as part of the Cubase license since 13. And that's kind of a subset of samples from the bigger Iconica. All right, so when you look at size of Iconica Sketch, okay, helps if I go to the right program. Iconica Sketch is 4.66 gigs. Now let's look at kind of the full VST instruments. All right, so if you were to get the Iconica sections and players, that's going to be 8100. It's about 130 gigs. If you get the ensembles, that's 50 gigs. So you could kind of get a sense. So let's say so I guess the whole thing's about 204 gigs if my math is right. So say 33, 52, so 85, 126, 154. So yeah. So that will give you kind of an idea of kind of the larger Iconica libraries as well. All right, wonderful to see Suede TV on. All right, so we have a question. Will the cheapest 32 gigabyte laptop run Cubase with very high RAM usage effects like FabFilter and Lander? Will we still need to freeze tracks? So I don't think FabFilter or Lander are going to like really eat up a lot of RAM. They'll probably eat up more processing. What eats up a lot of RAM or memory is going to be like, orchestral instruments like Iconica that we were just discussing. So I don't think that they use a lot of RAM. I think the Lander, if that's kind of like the mastering, AI mastering type of solution, So, but if you're going to invest in a laptop, it's probably worth it. I say sometimes you could spend an extra $150 and get another year of use out of it. So, like when you're doing it, I like to think of my computers as long-term investments, so I will try to get as much computer as I can. So, but there could be some laptops may not run, others well, like a DAW environment well, because of components on the laptop that are interrupting audio processes. So it's hard to say exactly. So we see what's the number one drum and bass loop plugin on the market. So I think the most capable drum plugin, a lot of people, don't utilize its full features, is probably the full Groove Agent, because many drum plugins will kind of be kind of EDM, MPC paradigm, or like a virtual drummer paradigm. But Groove Agent does both of those really well. So I think that's good. And for loop plugins, I'm not sure if you need plugins for loops or you just drop them into the project. All right, so wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Oxford. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you on the next Zoom social meetup. All right, Tireman Guitars. Thinking of transitioning from PC to Mac. Any suggestions? What would be the minimum spec? All right, so on the Macs, when you're kind of going to the Apple Silicon processors, I think that one thing to be aware of is that there's basically two different levels, two different types of processors that you're getting. You're getting a performance core or an efficiency core. The performance core gives you more capability of running real-time effects and plugins. The efficiency cores can be used for other tasks. So if you have the option, and it could be hard to find, you want more performance cores than efficiency cores. So if you have like an M3 that has 6 efficiency cores and 4 performance cores, you may be better off with an M1 or M2 that has 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. So it could kind of be balanced off that way. Also on the Mac, most of the base configurations that you see advertised, like, oh, I could get this Mac for $1,000, and it has 8 gigabytes of RAM. So while the operating system can be more efficient with memory usage, you still need more RAM. So bare minimum 16, ideally 32. On my personal computer, I run 128 gigs of RAM and I don't have to think about it or worry about it. So if you get 32 gigs of RAM or higher, that would be great. And it could depend on also if you're doing like orchestral work. If you're doing a lot of orchestral sequencing, that could take more RAM. If you're doing beat production, then that could take less RAM. But think of, and again, your 32 gigs of RAM, that could get you another year or 2 years of use out of that computer on the back end of your ownership of that computer or use of that computer. Whereas maybe saving a little bit more RAM, you might have to buy another computer sooner. So think about it with those lines of thought. And, again, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, think of a computer as your investment in your functionality. All right, so we see a question, is it possible for the play tool to play multiple selected tracks of events? So I think it's going to be just like selecting the one particular event. But let's see if I have these tracks selected. If I go to the play tool, I think it's the one that I hover on is what's played. Yeah, so it's kind of choosing the one, it's kind of for auditioning that specific one. You can set up like a macro to only play selected, to only play selected tracks. So you could probably set up a macro for that if needed, but the intention is that this is for doing a quick spot check when we kind of do this, or we're scrubbing, that it's going to be for, that particular one selected event that you're hovering over. All right, so we see from Tire Man Guitars, what's the new vocoder like? All right, so let's just take we'll just take something here. We'll try this. All right, so here I have a piano. Let's say I'll just do like my piano here. And I have... And I want to do a vocoder on the voice. So I'm going to come here, go to the inserts on the vocal track, and we'll go under pitch shift, and we'll see our vocoder. So if we want to just kind of play. Now, obviously with a vocoder, you often want to have like a carrier track. So I'm going to set this up for sidechain input, and we'll say, okay, I want the piano. Let's see if it's I think the TG3 as the input. And then we're going to take MIDI and put it on external. Let me just see if I could let me just check my routing here real quick. So this is I'm just going to switch this to an instrument track so I could send the MIDI to it. Hang on. All right, let me just send this piano part. I think what we need to do is to send the MIDI out. I'm sorry. We'll send the MIDI out here on this grand. So instead of going out to the grand, I could just add a MIDI track, and we'll set its output to the sidechain input of the vocoder. So now we have the MIDI that's being sent out. So you could just kind of set the MIDI output to be sent to the vocoder plugin, and then that you use that as the harmonic basis for it. So, but yeah, it's a great sounding vocoder. So play around with it. All right, so Tireman Guitars just asked, what is your system, Greg? Do you mind sharing the specs? So it's kind of an older, it's about 2 years old, almost 2.5 years old. But when I go to this, I'm running Mac OS Monterey. It's a 12.5. It's a MacBook Pro, 64 gigs of RAM, and Apple M1 Max. So that's my system. On my personal studio, I run an i9, a 10900 with 128 gigs of RAM. All right, so we see Michael Team's got a Tone X1 for his birthday. Now he has to figure it out. All right, so we see from Tim K says, I love how many ways there are to achieve the same things, but when they're all new, it's tricky to figure out which ways to weave together one's workflow. Maybe with experience, things tailor themselves. It also kind of sometimes, if you're coming from maybe your switch from one program to Cubase, you may be familiar with the concepts of routing from the old program, and you want to apply that paradigm into your current workflow, or if you wanted to do a better solution as well. So, and it's sometimes tricky with software design because you could come up with a feature, and then if you want to make the feature better, we can't necessarily take away the existing workflow and feature for other people, for existing customers. We need to maintain that, but still offer enhancements and different approaches without affecting people's projects and stuff like that. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop. Does anyone know if the media production plugin MMorph can be used in Cubase? Have not been able to set it up properly. and there's a message board chatter that would suggest that I am not alone. So we see Patrick .solenoid says that's working for him. So I'm not familiar with the plugin, but make sure if you have a 64-bit and 32-bit version that you're running 64-bit. If you have a 64-bit, if you have VST2 and VST3, that you're using the VST3 version. Don't even install the VST2 or 32-bit. All right, so we have a question. Patrick says, can I create folders in the mix console to group high tracks in Cubase 13? I'm new here and in Cubase 13. All right, so what we could do is, I'll just show you an example. So they may not show it as folders, but I think we could kind of get the same functionality. So let's say we are here and I have like all of my drums in a folder in this project. I'll just revert this quickly. And let's say I want my guitars and bass in a folder. So I'll just come right over here and I'll move selected tracks to new folder. All right, so we'll call this. Okay, so when I'm in my mix console, so say, I could come over to the visibility settings. All right, so I could see my folders listed. So I don't have my drums. I'll just label my drums folder here. Instead of calling it folder, we'll say drums. Okay, so when I'm in my mix console, we could go to the visibility tab. So if I'm on the lower zone mixer, and so here we see the folders represented. So if I only want to see the drums, I can hold down the shift and just click there. And now I only see the drums, or now I only see the guitars and bass. Or if I just quickly want to scroll down and select all the events. And when we go to the full screen mixer, I can do the same thing. So let's say I don't want to see any of my inputs. Just kind of swipe. I only want to see my drums and bass. I only want to see shift and just click left. I only want to see my drums. So now we could pick and choose just folders for hiding. So you may not see the folder in the mixer, but I think that the functionality will be similar and get you the same results in the long run. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so Tireman Guitars says, does anyone have issues with old plugins not working anymore? I'm still on version 8, Windows 7. So I think 8.5 was a cutoff for VST, like 32-bit plugins. I think that they stopped being officially supported in version 8.5. So most, the vast majority have obviously updated to 64-bit as plugins have been updated, and VST3 plugins just about, unless the company is out of business, there should be VST3 and 64-bit, which you'd probably want to be running. All right, so we see GTMM Music. Thanks for your explanation. I know how to add sends, but I was not sure how I can Q-Link or offline process a specific area. You could also be explaining how to create groups and edit it. It would be great. All right, so, if we wanted to just do like all the drums and do a flanger just on a small section of the drums. So let's say as we're playing, I just want to come here. I'm going to use my range selection tool. We'll hit F7. And say now let's put a flanger on just that selected range of drums. And now so that flanger is just on the selected range. So we can make the selection with the range tool. And then as we get near the end, now our drums won't have the flanger on it. So let's say I want to delete, I want to take the 2 guitar parts and put a delay on it. Let's say right here. Let's say I'll just make it here. Now our guitars will just have the mono delay. And then when we get out of this section here, our delay should be turning off any second now. So that's how you can do it. So you can do multiple selections with the direct offline process very easily. Okay, Celine Yasmin asks, what track to add, record my guitar through M Audio in Cubase, and what input and output do I put when requesting from adding the track? All right, so the secret that you want to do is just to come over here first and make sure that your M Audio interface is what is selected when we go to your audio system. So we're going to select your audio system, and then we just want to make sure that we have your M Audio audio interface selected here. So once we have that set, you want to, it should by default, if you go to your studio to audio connections, we can see your inputs, and you'll probably see just like it's one stereo input. So we can see stereo input, and make sure that this is set for your inputs and outputs. So you can see your input, set it there, and then you could see your output. So you could have this set. So for just starting off, start with your outputs, set to outputs 1 and 2, and then when you add an audio track, so we're going to add an audio track, so you're going to record your guitar. Here we can say, I want to go to stereo 1, and the audio is going out of my stereo output, and at that point, add the track and hit record, and you should be all set. And it's always a good idea to name your track before you record audio, so that it's not, you don't have a whole hard drive full of audio files called audio 01, audio 02. So give that a try. And welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see Daniela from Bochum, Germany. Great to see you on the live stream. See Captain Energy Music says he's just listening in because, you know, job. All right, so we see from Avli Music Production, says I use Control Room and Q Mixes all the time. In what scenario would I use Phones feature in Control Room, since the Q Mix is sending phone mixes using my interface to the performers? So let's say you are yet a scenario, and this often happens with our composers, where they may be composing and they have an assistant, and sometimes they have shared access to the computer. So let's say the composer's like, okay, find a loop, you know, for me that would fit this, and I'm going to do editing on something else. So what you could do is the assistant could, because the phones, when we come over here to the phones, so we go to your VST audio connections, we would have a separate headphone output. So we would just have a unique headphone out. So to say we're going out of 1 and 2 for our main headphones and 3 and 4 for our studio phones. So now I could just come over here and audition loops. If I was the assistant, and I could just come over here while, you know, they're coming up with parts, and I could just say, okay, now when I go to audition loops, I could monitor in the headphones without it going into the speakers confusing the composer or the clients, and you say, okay, I found this snare, let's try this snare instead, and then you could replace. So this way we could, the assistant, an engineer could use the headphones independently of what's going on in the mix. So the client may be listening to the mix, but you may be going through and searching for other sounds and presets and auditioning them using the phones channel, so that the client or your boss, the composer, doesn't have to hear you do that. So you have kind of your own separate, unique audio monitoring path. That's kind of the intention of the headphones in the control room. So it's not to mimic the main studio output. Okay. All right, so we see just a Dorco question. Do exist there drum maps compatible to standards like the official drum maps for orchestration of orchestras? So I don't think that there's any official drum maps for orchestral instruments, but you can make your own drum maps. All right, hang on just a second. Let me see if I get my license activated. Sorry about that. But, so there are standards for like general MIDI drum maps, but for orchestral stuff, I don't really think that there is a standard layout for that. But or I'll just I may have a So once we go to the setup here, you can choose where the percussion kit is going to be stored. So this is kind of how most standard like drum sets will be stored, but you could store these as different presets if you want. So if you wanted to just see single line instruments, you could do that, or if you want to see more of a grid. So, but again, I don't think that there is a standard mapping for orchestral instruments akin to like a general MIDI drum map that's available. But you can edit the note placement and stuff. So we see from Tireman Guitars says, "Oh my God, the chat's about 10 minutes behind the actual questions." Yeah, I try my best to catch up, but it's pretty normal. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on the live stream from Martinez, California. All right, so we have Enrique Marsal checking in. It says from B, I believe it's from Barcelona. Never been there, always wanted to go. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see a nice comment from Stephen Candrew. Says hi again, and thanks for all you do. So you're welcome. Just thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we see from Tireman Guitars, have the track icons changed since Cubase 8? So I think that they're probably the same. So let's say if we want to come over and let's set up our sections, and we'll see if our pictures are here. You could always put in user pictures as well. So these icons I think are similar, but you could always have user icons. So if you wanted to have a particular picture, you could do that. I used to, like when I would do recordings from someone, I would actually just take a quick picture of like what their amp settings were, what their pedal board looked like, and I could store that as a track picture inside of Cubase. See, Gareth is saying that Michael Teams' voice is marvelous. All right, so we have Sway TV asks, "Hi, I forgot how to send a stereo mix I'm listening to the QSend, so the musicians are listening to my studio mix." Okay, so let's say we go to the control room. We want to go to the actual Q mix. So let's say we come over here. And so right now, by default, we could have the individual Q mixes set up so that we could audition the Q mixes. If you want them to listen to the mix that's in the computer here, we would just click on the mix button. So now they're listening to their Q mix. So Q mix 1, Q mix 2, Q mix 3. If you want them to listen, let me clear my throat. If you want them to listen to your actual mix, what you want to do is just click on the mix button within the Q mix. So you say, okay, the drummer's now listening to my mix. He's now listening to his Q mix in the headphones. When we go to the guitar, they can listen to my mix or their mix. So just click on this button, and then that should do the trick for you. All right, so we see Stephen Candrew says, a few weeks back I was asking about removing silence in an audio track, and he explained it. But the reason I was asking is to try and save space and actually remove the silences, and therefore creating new files to allow me to remove the original song, long, full audio file. All right, so again, if we wanted to do that, let's say I have a file here, then let's say I move this. All right, and let's say this is all one long audio file. I'll cut out some little sections here so it's not so universally boring there. So All right, so let's say we have audio files that have silence, and we want to get rid of the dead space to free up hard disk space. So I'll just quickly bounce the selection here. Okay, so again, what we could do is select the event, go to audio, and we want to go to advanced, and we're going to detect silence. So we could set our threshold accordingly here. So we can say anything below this threshold. We could analyze and then process, and now those silent parts are eradicated. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Steve. See, Tireman Guitars says that's an amazing feature, would save me so much time. So, which I knew what it was now. Okay, so we see about the folders on the tracks from Patrick. Says, thanks. Having folders functions as bus would be really helpful, especially when working with multiple instruments that have several outputs. Right now I can hide my drum track and use the bus to control the volume, but visually it doesn't align with the arrangement. All right. All right, so I'll show you what you could do, because there's actually kind of a macro to help with this. So let me... All right, so I want to drag all these out here. All right, so let's say I have no folder, so I'm going to remove this selected track. Okay, so what you can do is there's an included macro, so you get some macros, and don't be intimidated by my macro list, because I've made lots of macros on the live streams. But here, I think you'll find it as selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So I selected all my drum tracks. I come right over here. I say we're going to make a group track. I'll call it drums. So now all of my folder track, I see all my tracks in the folder, and within the folder is the group channel. So when we go to the visibility section, I can say let's just select the drums again, and now that would include the drum bus, because when we added both of them at the same time, the drum bus is automatically placed within the folder. So again, utilize the macro selected tracks to new folder and group, and then that would take care of it for you. But you could have the group channel directly in with the folder so that everything is nice and tidy and organized as well. All right, so we see this from Tireman Guitars. Does Cubase 13 have an EQ curve for different headphones, or is it that currently a Nuendo only feature? So Nuendo, it does have the headphone match plugin, and that's a Nuendo only exclusive feature, not in Cubase. And we see from Tireman Guitars impulse response. So I don't think it's an impulse response, but it's more of just an EQ curve. So impulse response is generally going to be more of like an ambient character, such as like a guitar cabinet, or like what a particular room or hall sounds like, where you kind of sample the ambient characteristics. Those are generally referred to as impulse responses, and you don't really have that with headphones, since they're directly on your head and don't really have the impact of the room on the headphones. All right, so we have George checking in from Germany. Says, hope you all are well. So glad to see you on. Hope you are well as well. Okay, George's question. What's the best way to start a new project? On the Cubase hub, I want to name the folder of the project, but it seems that the new project is not automatically saved. I have to do that manually. Yeah, so, just like when you start something in Word, it doesn't automatically save the Word document for you. So when I come over here, it says do a new project. So I always recommend every time you do a new project, put it into its own unique folder. So by default, you'll get asked for prompt for project location. So let's say I'm going to call this I'm going to do a new folder. So I'm going to come over here. And let's say since it was Michael Teams' birthday, we'll give him the honor. So we're going to call this project Michael Teams. Okay, so now all of the files in this project folder, anytime we record audio in here, so we'll add a couple of audio tracks. I'll just hit the tab key to navigate. Okay, so now I'm going to record, enable all these tracks. All right, so I could record files, and these files are named because so as soon as we record, those files are going to be saved into that particular folder. So when we come over here to our Finder, or your Windows Explorer, and not my web browser, sorry about that. So I recorded the files. Now I haven't saved a project because, maybe I just don't want to save it. So when we go to our documents, we'll go to projects here. So, but, as we do that, or I'll just show it here in the pool, we can see that all of the files are going to be placed into the folder that we recorded, but we still haven't, at this point, we haven't saved the song. So we could record files, but that doesn't necessarily save the project. Like I could start typing in Word or do projects in a program. If I don't save the document, it's not going to be there. So when we go to save the document, so I say save, and at this point, we see that it's automatically going to be placed into the folder. We could just say, Michael Teams, happy birthday. And now that folder is saved. So defining where the audio files, where the project will be saved to, is done before the actual project is saved. Because you could save a project with nothing in it when it's being set up, but then you record and close down, you'll get informed that you want to save. But this way, again, the project is user saved. You could have it set for auto save if you want to in the preferences under general, but but just starting the project doesn't immediately save the project. You have to give it a name, and it's kind of a pretty standard computing convention. All right, so we have JAKZ Jax saying good evening to everyone. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl says, sure, there's a standard layout for untuned percussion and also drum sets. I gave my scoring to a film orchestrator. It was done with Unify from Plugin Guru and got it back because nothing is really playable by musicians. Unify are really just fantasy drums there because the maps are not reproducible. So yeah, but there isn't a standard, there could be a standard notation, but it's not really, so there isn't like a standard drum map for orchestral instruments because they'll all have samples on different keys, and but there are notation conventions, but but a lot of times it doesn't really matter what the actual like sample mapping is. All right, so we see from Antino Evans, welcome to live stream. Hi Greg, always love the Q&As. How does one make realistic sounding bass guitar slide? So sometimes you could do like a pitch bend is kind of an interesting way of doing it. So let's come over here and we'll just load up a library inside of Halion Sonic, the electric bass, which is part of Absolute 6, and this has some clever things that we could do. So let's say I want to come over here and so I could just come over here and say, okay, I want to do so you could use like your pitch bend wheel. Now, sometimes you'll have instruments that will have as part of the particular instrument. So say, your typical range of bass, but in the electric bass, you could actually incorporate like these different slides. And these are just, again, part of how the instrument was sampled, so that as we want to incorporate these things for kind of hyper realism. And then you could just choose to kind of, play your different parts right here. So like as we want to just say, okay, I want sustain. So like some instruments will have these types of slides just as part of the instrument. So you could have instruments that actually do these types of things, and often that may sound more realistic than doing pitch bends, but in a pinch you could do pitch bends as well. All right, so we see Big Rat Studios. It just says, please, can you explain why my project does not match the project tempo each time I open it? All right, so let's do a quick test. I'll do a new project. All right, and I'm going to set my project here to 111 beats a minute. And let's save. All right, so currently I don't have a master track enabled. All right, so let's come over here. I'm going to close this project. And let's open it again. So we see my tempo now is 120. Let's open it to See if the tempo is recalled. So it looks like it is. Check to make sure that if we have a tempo track, okay, so if the tempo track is turned off, so let's say my tempo here is set to 89. So I'm going to save this project. So it will save. It's still 111. Okay, but my tempo map is disabled. So we come here. When I turn my tempo map on, it's set to 111. When it's off, I just have it set to another value. So I'm going to close this, and we saved it with it off. So let's go ahead and open it again. So we'll go to recent projects, and we'll go to 111, and I think it should be like 89 probably, because it wasn't saved with the tempo track on. So make sure that the tempo track is on, and now when we save, we'll close the project and open it up again. That now we should see it at 111. So looking here, so we're 120 in this project. Jump there, and we see that it's back to 111. So make sure that the tempo track is active. I think that if you save it with that turned on, that it should come back at the proper tempo. So let me know if that it makes sense or is helpful. All right, so we see other comments from Daniela. Says Unify are really just fantasy drums, or because the maps are not reproducible. You just wish for my Unify library that everything works independent from DAW and setups. Okay, so I guess if it's not really reproducible by musicians, I'm not sure if you need to print it out as notation. So. All right. All right, so we see GTMM Music says thanks once again for the third time this evening for your patience. And let me grab my phone, turn it off real quick. My colleague John Shower, one of my favorite people. All right, so GTMM Music says thanks once again for the third time this evening for your patience, your clear way of explaining. Always a pleasure to watch and learn from your direct answers from the answers to the others. All right, so we see Patrick just saying that works, thanks. Michael Teams is honored. We're honored to have you on the live stream, and we appreciate all your virtual ice creams. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Newcastle. He says he's in the UK playing some samba in English bands. All right, Tim Weinheimer, great to see you on from Mission Viejo, California. It says Greg unlocks the secrets of Cubase 13. All right, so we see Jan asks, is it possible to change the alt behavior in the mixer? I often use Q-Link when using, example, Pro Q on 2 link channels. I need the alt key as a modifier in a plugin, which then disables Q-Link. So let me see if it's might be able to do it in the preferences under the tool modifiers. Let me see. not seeing it as... Let's see if it's maybe... So you might be able to assign a new key command for QLink to turn it on. So you could try that, but it might be kind of a fixed function. But I'll do some more research on it and see if there's a way of changing that. I know we could do it for the tools, but it may be just kind of an ingrained function of Cubase. It's pretty standard throughout many different aspects. All right, so you see from Daniela, says I did upload just a corrected file to my channel, and I just wish to know if it's compatible to Dorico or if I have to include a separate description. So let me know, like, if that's for the drum part. So I'm sure there's ways of notating, very esoteric and exotic 21st century style notation stuff. All right, so we see from Steve McAndrew just about the delete silence. Says, Greg, I think it still keeps the original log file non-destructive, and it's only showing the regions. It does still keep the original file. It's not saving it all. All right, so let's take a look at it again here. All right, so I'll just record kind of a record file here. Here, I'll just make it like we did before, be faster. Okay, I'll just put a spacer between the events. All right, so I'm going to render this track. We'll do it as one event. Okay, so we have render silence before. We'll go to our pool. Okay, so let's say we have 51:48 seconds. Okay. Excuse me. I'm just going to get something to drink. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Just had a little tick on my throat. All right, so let's do our detect silence. All right, so we see options here for add as regions or strip silence. So let's go ahead and try this. Okay, let me, just before I do that, I'm going to bounce this. Make a new file of this so we can compare. All right, so now I'm going to bounce this selection, and we should see two different audio files in the pool. All right, let me just okay, so we're going to have 01 and 02. So let's take a look, and we see that they are same time, same size. All right, so now I'm going to do detect silence on this so we can compare it to that one. So we go to audio, again to advanced, detect silence. And again, I'm going to choose not to add as regions and to strip the silence. All right, now let's look at the pool. All right, so it still looks like it's all right, so looks like the dead space is still there. When we undo it, let me just take another look. All right, so let's say if we do this now, and if I take this file so you see, let's look at the statistics of this file here, and I'm going to just try a backup. Let me just, so we'll go to audio to statistics. Okay, and let me see if I come over here on this file, we go to media to all right, so the silence is still there, but it's just kind of hidden. But I think if we do a backup project, Okay, I'll just do a new folder. We're going to back up to silence. And then here I'm going to minimize audio files. Let's close this. Now let's open the backup. See if this is the right one. We can see that this isn't the same file, but let me look at this file here. We go into all right, so I think maybe let's see if we could just do the minimize files on this. So let's say we have our original here. And we have this muted. So I'm going to try one more time. We'll do the silence. And see if we could just immediately do the minimize files afterwards. So let's see if we could just, for the media, yeah, I'll play around with it some more. I'm pretty sure that there's a way of doing it, but if we, so this was on the minimized files, we could see that it doesn't immediately like have the full files. So if we take these two files and we maximize it out, we can see that those are different. But it looks like even this is still going to be different space. So let's look at the pool one more time here. But it looks like here we have the same files, but it's used 16 times. So, and we see that this is only 17 seconds. So after doing a minimize, it looks like once we minimize files in the project backup that it is less. But let me just try just one more time here. So I'll delete those files. Let me just do a new project and I'll drag this over. Okay, so again, we have this as "51 seconds." Audio. don't think we can minimize. Let's see if we could. We don't have the minimize files there, but if we do a backup project at this point, we'll call it silence 3. And we choose to minimize audio files. So now when we minimize it, we can see that we've lost 34 seconds of time. So, but I'll see if I can come up with a better way other than exporting or doing a project backup with that. Sorry, it took a while, but I'll see if I can have that figured out for Friday, a better workflow. All right, let's get started back. All right, wonderful to see Bernard Dobbs checking in from Canada. All right. All right, so we have a question from Big Rat Studios. Please, can you also explain why my metronome does not play even when I activate it? So a lot of times when people aren't hearing the metronome, could be because the metronome is turned on here. If you're utilizing the control room, make sure that your control room metronome is turned on. You could also come over to your transport, and if we go to your metronome setup, I've seen sometimes people may have it just kind of turned off here, or if it's being routed somewhere else. So make sure that this is being sent out there, but a lot of times when I get that question, it's just in the control room, the metronome got turned off, because it could be turned on here, but the control room can override that setting as well. Okay. All right, so I guess it's Ali Johnson asks, "Hi guys, question. I have Artist 12 and just bought Pro 13. Is it a preferable way to install Pro? Anything to think about?" It's very straightforward. So it's actually just going to take your Cubase, actually when you buy Cubase Artist, you have Cubase Pro basically already installed. So once you just do the update, once you activate the license, and you could do that utilizing the Steinberg download assistance or the license activation manager. Once you put the download access code in, at that point, it's a very straightforward process, just like installing our program. Then the license will switch over and you'll be having all sorts of fun. See Gareth Kitch is saying, "Cage, what a loaded Stockhausen," talking about 24th century notation. So yeah, I had some orchestra I'm playing in. We're doing a Philip Glass concerto for two timpanists. So lots of interesting notation styles in that. All right, just reading through comments. Seeing discussion of different soundtracks like 2001, Planet of the Apes. All right. Okay. More great discussion on 20th century film music used in films. All right, so we see question from Thomas Lindholm. Is it not possible to modulate an audio effect in Halion? All right, so let's go ahead and open up an audio effect here. So let's go to an instrument track. Let's pop over to Halion. Okay, so let's say all right, so let's come over here to edit. Just let's come over here to the mixer first, and let's put distortion on. All right, so let's say we have. Okay, so now we want to go to the modulation matrix. So we have that going on. So let's. Sorry, I'm having just my brain cramp on the modulation matrix where to find it. So let me just. Sorry, just having my brain cramp on this. Let me just. Let me try just dropping a sample in. I should be able to. I'll just try just a little more. Let me just. If not, I'll just dig it up for Friday. Let me just. Sorry for my brain cramp. I'll see if I can circle back if we have time. But I know it can be done with a modulation matrix with that, so. But I'll have it for Friday. All right, reading through. All right, so we have War Walker saying nice comments, so thanks for that. All right, so we see DJ Showcase asks, using macOS, my dock is set to minimize app into icon using 2 monitors, one for the mix console, one for the main project. When I minimize the main project, it gets stuck in the icon. How to restore? Okay, so one for the mix console, one for the main project. It says when I minimize the main project, it gets stuck in the icon. How to restore? So if you go to the window menu, that you could just from within Cubase. So let me know if you have the Cubase windows, the Cubase menus as the active app, and then you could just choose to open up from the window menu. So let me know if that works. All right, we see Gerald Ely has to take off. Thanks for joining us. All right, Michael Teams says, sorry, brainwaved by on this. Forgot how to stick 2 different voices in Halion 7 and get them to play together. All right, so hopefully I should be able to do that. Well, see if my brain cramp continues. So I'm just going to click here on, so like when you start off, you could, go to the more advanced, and then, so we have the amped Electra, and I'll turn off the distortion on that. So now I could click here. Let's load up a different sound. And I'm going to drag it to slot 2. So when we go to our MIDI, we can see that this is on channel 1, bank A, and I want this to be on channel 1, bank A. And now if we go to the mixer, we could layer those 2 sounds. So once you kind of load them in, at that point, just go and set them to the same MIDI channel. And then even if you wanted one to be transposed up an octave, so if you want, and then we could also choose like different velocity ranges. So only at high velocities does the octave voice kick in. So we could now just come over here and say, so when I hit it soft velocity, it's only playing this voice, but a harder velocity, the other voice will kick in. All right. All right, so we're seeing from DJ Showcases, yeah, the Cubase menu disappears on the main monitor, which hosts the main project. Clicking on an icon doesn't restore, however, the menu is up on the second monitor. All right, so as long as you have the window up, I'll see if I could recreate it. I think I have a second screen I might be able to hook up to my MacBook Pro just to test. But see if you could, go from the Windows, from the window menu on the screen that has it, and see if you could do that. All right, so I know we had some questions that were sent in. Let me get to those before we run out of time. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so the first question we had is how can you get multi-mono plugins in Cubase similar to other DAWs? If you put any stereo plugin on a surround sound or immersive sound bus, it will adopt to the channels there, allowing it to affect any number of channels. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I have a 5.1 bus on this channel here. So when we go to open it up, we're going out to a 5.1 output, so we could pan this around. Now, if we wanted to have effects that were added into particular buses, and we're not really going to be able to hear a 5.1, but I want to take this 5.1 track. So if we come over to an insert, what we could do is, if I put this insert on, and one of the unique things of VST3 is that with the VST3 we could actually have the channels configured to whatever channel configuration it is in. So while most programs, if you wanted to do this particular plugin as a as a 5.1, like the insert, to do all channels within that, you might need to load up, 3 or 4 different plugins to do that. So with VST3, it'll automatically convert. And I think if we come over to the routing page here, that you could just kind of choose which particular channel it's going to. Now, when we work with send effects, what we could do is let's say I want a stereo reverb, but I want it in the back channel. So one of the things that you could do is come over and say, okay, let's go to our VST connections. We could go to our outputs, and in our 5.1 output, we could define something that's called child buses. So I could treat this, my stereo, like left and right, my stereo left surround, right surround, or stereo center LFE channels. I could treat these as kind of separate buses. So I could have my stereo out child bus, and these are buses within my 5.1 output. So when I go to my surround file here and I want to add an effects channel to it, and I want that effects channel to be in stereo, I could now come over here. We're going to add a reverb. So let's say we add our RoomWorks reverb, and instead of it going out to the 5.1 out, I could choose for it to go out of my stereo out, or if I want this to just go out of my stereo left surround, right surround. So now as I add a track, this reverb is routed to the rear channels only. So anytime that I access this particular reverb, I could say, okay, we're going to access our RoomWorks reverb, and as we add this reverb in, I could have my stereo or a mono reverb just working on a particular channel. So if I wanted to add a mono effect, what I could do is let's add an effects channel to the selected channels. I want the configuration to be mono, and I want this to be, we'll do a chorusing. So we'll get to our modulations. Let's go to a chorus. So now, as we do this, but before I do that, I'll add a flanger this time. Sorry about that for the confusion. Or I'll add a chorus again. So I'm going to add an effects channel here. And I'm going to choose again for that to be mono, but I could say I only want this in the center channel. So it's not going to go to the 5.1 out, it's only going to go to the center channel of this chorusing. So now I could have effects that are in the 5.1, all in the 5.1, just in the front, or surround as stereo, or this effect that's going to be just in the center channel. So at this point, now when we go to our panning, we could also just say, okay, we want to go to panning of different devices that you could on the effect itself. Let's go to our effects return channel. So let's say I want to go to my I want to add a 5.1 effects channel. So we say, okay, we want this to be 5.1. I want this to go out of my 5.1 out. We'll just switch this to a phaser. So we have a 5.1 phaser because that's always helpful. But now when we go to the effects return channel on our phaser, that we could choose to mute our different sources as well. So if we want to just come over here and pan, and let's say I want the phaser in every channel except for the center channel, I could just click, let's see what the modifier key is here. I could just have it in the channel, or we could just say, okay, I only want it in, these particular channels. So I don't want it in the center channel, but I want it in left, right, left surround, right surround. So this way we could choose which channels the effects go to as well. So it gives you a lot of flexibility for working with different channel configurations in 5.1. Okay. Next question. It says, hi Greg, first I want to thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you. Here are 4 attached screenshots I'll be referring to. My problem is that some MIDI loops in MediaBay will not play. I have no problem when I click a loop with the graphic pictured in screenshot. Good loop 1. I'll show these. My problem is that MIDI loops that have no graphic picture in the screenshot. MIDI loop 2, the MIDI player at the bottom is running, but I hear nothing. Also, a not connected button appears with the player controls pictured in a screenshot. When I click on that button, I get a menu list of my MIDI connections pictured in the connections menu. What can I do to hear these loops? Okay, so when we do different MIDI loops, so there's MIDI files and MIDI loops. MIDI loops are associated with a particular instrument. So, and this is kind of unique to Cubase. So if I want it to come over here, when I play back, let's say this synth pop preview, it's going to actually play back this particular sound. And I'll just make sure this is kind of turned up. So these have the particular sounds associated with them. So as I come over here and say, okay, I'm looking for acoustic piano, this knows to load up the particular sound that it was created with and plays the file. So MIDI loop has the instrument, the VST instrument associated with it. Now when we go to something like a MIDI file, I'll come over here to my file browser and we'll go to desktop. So let's go to this computer, to desktop, and I want to look for, particular files. So here I have a MIDI file. So let's say, but now when I play this, we don't, a MIDI file in itself, like the nature of the file format, it doesn't have any particular sound associated. It's completely generic. So here we may have to just say, okay, I want to play this back, and I'm going to add an instrument track here. We'll just add a grand. So let me add an instrument. We'll choose a piano. I'll just load up a quick upright piano here. All right, let's see if we... All right, so now that we have this file, we could choose that I want to play this back through the grand, and so this may not have any notes in it, but at this point we could just audition through a particular MIDI instrument itself. So we need to set the MIDI instruments for MIDI files, but MIDI loops, there's already a connection between the virtual instrument that's used and the actual file in and the notes, so that they are linked together, so that you don't have a clavinet part that's really funky playing, a string legato patch or drum sounds or Latin percussion where it doesn't make any sense. So that's why you can hear some of the MIDI ones, the MIDI loops in preview, but you have to manually set it for preview with other devices for regular MIDI files. All right, so I have a question. Is there a way to see audio files when you freeze a MIDI track? All right, so I'll just jump to a different project here. Let's activate it. All right, so when we freeze a track, it's kind of intended to, one, free up system resources so that as we play, that we are able to actually see, so it's not taking up CPU cycles. So when we do this and we have ePiano, I'm going to freeze the track. Okay, so I'll just select this. We click on our little snowflake. We could include, so we'll freeze the track. So now that we freeze the track, it's rendering it as audio. I can't move it. I can't edit it anymore because it's already kind of been rendered. But it doesn't show the particular audio file. If we come over to our project folder, so we'll come, say, to our documents, and we'll go to our projects, and let's look at our jump off folder. And when we look at this, we should see freeze. So the audio file is in here. So we're going to say, okay, this is Halion Sonic 01. So if I wanted to just drag that file into my audio folder, I could see the audio file. That's what it's playing. Now, if you want to see the audio file, just don't use freeze, but use render in place. Because what render in place is going to allow us to do is I could take this particular file, select it, then I could just go to my render settings, and I'll say, okay, we want to keep this. We're going to do one event. I'm going to mute the source events. So I could select the event or the track. And now when I render, I see the audio file and the MIDI information here is automatically muted. So if you want to see, we could think of the freeze as being kind of a generation 1 concept, like when computers were much slower and you had to constantly, freeze files to play large projects back. Now that we want more flexibility for editing and naming conventions, that's what the render in place will allow you to do. So think of the render in place as kind of the next generation. And as we discussed before, people get used to using the freeze function, and that's great, but we can't necessarily take that away. But if you want to see the audio files, I think there's no reason not to do a render in place where you could then still have your MIDI file, MIDI track, your MIDI event that's still editable. It's muted, so it's not going to sound and play double, and you have your audio event with it. And you could even choose to group these together by hitting Control or Command plus the letter G. And now as you move, those events will always be kind of grouped together so one can't get moved. And if you want to ungroup, Control or Command plus the letter U. All right, another question. I wonder if you could help with beatbox. Using Halion 7, I add a track, then beatbox, and select Dusty House 08. There are 4 patterns in the box, and I want to record the changes between the patterns when I press 1, 2, 3, 4 in record mode. When I try to record these changes, I always end up with only one single pattern in the track. How can I record the changes in pattern when I click a different pattern number in the same track? I use Cubase 13 Pro, Wavelab, Absolute 6 on Windows 10. Thank you, Greg. All right, so when we want to work with, let me see, I think I'll just revert this quickly. All right, let me just... Okay, so we have our beatbox track here. So let's look at it. All right, so with this, we could have patterns that play. So I got pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, and pattern 4. So I don't think that actually, when we see this, that Groove Agent, that bbox is sending this MIDI information out to the program. So if I come over and I wanted to do this, what I could do is just select the MIDI icon here. So we have the stop. So what I could do is I have pattern 1 turned on, and I could drag that to my bbox track, copy it a couple times, and then when I select pattern 2, I grab the MIDI icon, I could drag that out to my project. Let's take patterns, we'll copy these, and then I want pattern 3, so I select pattern 3, drag it out, and then pattern 4 and drag it out. So now as we do this, it'll play. We have pattern 1, it's going to switch to pattern 2 here. And now I have pattern 1, pattern. So now another way to do this, if you want to actually record the switching of the different devices, if you don't want to drag, is just automate the particular plugin. So now I'll come here, let's turn this on. I'm going to play pattern 1. So we're going to hit play. Now let's say, okay, we'll put our metronome on. So we'll say, okay, we're going to play pattern 1. And now I'm going to switch to pattern 2. Back to pattern 1. Pattern 3. Pattern 1. Let's go to pattern 3, then 4. And now stop. Okay, so now when I play back, it's going to recall this automation. And we can see it's going to be switching to the different patterns. And then it will just stop, coming up. So you could just kind of come right over here, and when we look at the automation, so I'm going to just open up my automation panel, and we show used automation. So if you actually want to record it, we can see that we have kind of the start stop automation plus the variation. So we could just kind of, if you wanted to actually record the movement, it's not going to record it as MIDI because Halion doesn't necessarily output the MIDI data, but you could record the automation of this so that you can automate the changes in the start and stop behavior. All right, and we had a question last week about why it was louder when someone was recording they were hearing it louder when they were recording in direct monitoring versus not in direct monitoring. It says my input channel is set at 0 dB only, and there's no plugins on the audio channels at all. It's the volume coming through the speakers or headphones that gets lowered, not the signal level. The only way I could get the volume to be the same as direct monitoring volume is by increasing the volume control in the control room or by increasing the fader of the track the audio is recorded to. All right, so I guess when they're recording, it was louder when in direct monitoring than when direct monitoring was disabled. So what I would always do, just to check to make sure that there isn't any attenuation, because there's lots of areas it could be a lot of areas that aren't necessarily plugin related. But let's say if we activate this project, do a very simple test. All right, so on an input channel, place a test tone generator plugin. So at this point, when we look at this, my test tone, I'm going to say we're going to put it at -6 dB output. Okay, so we can see on our input channel, we have a test tone. Now I'm going to route this input channel to this track. So when I kind of turn this on, so we're going to make sure that this particular track, let me turn it down to kill. All right, so now we're monitoring this track. I can see that the input signal here is going into the channel at the same volume, and the same volume is going to our outputs, and we can see this reflected in our control room. So if we go to our meter here, we can see that we are at -6 dB all the way through. Now some things to check is if you're still having, so if this, make sure that this signal path is all matching. So we could see our input channel with the oscillator, and that channel is going in, being fed as the input into this channel. This channel is going out of my stereo out, and this is my master meter. So we can see that this is all -6 dB. So that all looks good. Now, you could also have plugins that are on the control room. So make sure also that when we're doing this, that you don't have gain on any of the channels. So if we look at our input channel here, you could attenuate the gain of the channel but not see the fader. So there is a pre-gain. Make sure that's not on any of the channels. And if you still kind of see this discrepancy, see where your control room is. So if you're doing this and your control room is at, minus, if you're looking at this, also check your control room for inserts there, because you could have, if you click on the main tab, you could have different inserts in the control room that could also attenuate the volume. So check those different sources somewhere, but just do a very simple test, taking your input channel, put a test tone generator, and you'll find that under tools, and just, set the level here, set that as the input for a channel, see if those match. If those don't match, then there's something on that channel that's attenuating the volume. Check for pre-gain if you don't have any plugins. If you see that this is matching, when this is monitored enabled and you look at the track, we can see that we have the same gain structure all the way through here. So let's say we now want to look at, so we have -6 all the way. So nothing is attenuating the gain. But if I'm on this particular track and I adjust my gain, we can see that that can make a big difference. Or on my master, the gain is adjusted. So check your pre-fader gains and see if that is making a difference. But this will give you an idea if you have the clean signal path with just the oscillator to test tone generator plugin enabled. All right, let me jump back to live questions. And again, you could always email questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, let me just... Tim K says this is totally the best place to learn. I've learned several cool features today for the first time. Halion tricks, Cubase treats. Hey, it's October after all. All right, so we see question. How would I create a ducking effect using the stereo delay? All right, let me just... All right, let me just jump this project here. So I think if we... All right, let me get this back to where it was. All right, so let's say we want to put a delay on this. All right, I'm going to send this to stereo out. All right, and I'm just going to duplicate this particular vocal track. All right. All right, so let's come over here and we want to duck based on all right, let me make sure I have the right one.
For 1,000 years and a day, you were the party, the big event. I was.
All right, so it's all right. So I think we could set this to like. Okay, so I think what we do is take like the duplicated track and use that as the basis for the sidechain. Let me just make sure I'm in the right delay here.
Sure, everything. Now I'm uninvited. I'm on the outside looking in.
So you hear that that's kind of, so we're basically feeding the one track into the other one for ducking. Now another way of doing this that could be even simpler, let me clear my throat, is just to, if you use the, so let's say we want to come here, we could just say, let's add the multi-tap delay. So we'll come right over here, add the multi-tap delay, and this has a ducking feature built in.
You put the close side up on your heart.
So I want a quarter note delay.
The lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? I'm uninvited.
So here you can just kind of set the amount and the threshold.
Thought I would be the very last one to leave. I plan on loving you forever. Didn't you see?
Then as the reverb stops.
The way I looked at you, I felt right.
So you could also check out like the multi-tap delay. That's a great function for that. All right, so we see question, when using the range selection tool, when zooming using control scroll, it zooms only if the mouse is over an empty space, but if you go to an event, it doesn't zoom. Is there any way to make it work? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so I have the range selection tool here. And let me just check empty space. So when using a range selection tool with control scroll, it zooms only if the mouse is over an empty space. All right, so my cursor now isn't over an empty space. It zooms only is over, but if you go over an event, it doesn't zoom. All right, so it looks like it's whether I'm over an event or not doesn't seem to have an impact, and that's with the range tool selected. So I'll put it into my combination mode here. So it seems to work kind of as expected for me. Let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are. All right, so we see just comments as for upcoming versions, please add an option to switch between waveform view and automation view, just like in Pro Tools, to make it easier instead of showing automation tracks underneath the main. I think also if you're doing lots of automation, that it's critical that you can see multiple and edit multiple automation events. Now, one thing that a lot of people miss is if we come over here to the automation setup, if you hit F6 and go to settings, at this point you could say show data on tracks. And now that if you show data on the tracks, so again, settings, that as we go to do automation, so we open up our automation lanes, that we could actually see the data on the particular track. So if you have volume and panning and effect sends, here it's helpful to be able to just say, okay, I want my effect sends as well. So say, okay, I want my send here level, that we can edit multiple automation states. So sometimes people don't know that you could just turn on the show data on tracks. But if you're editing multiple events, that's as a lot of our more, especially post-production, and a lot of people, they're not just editing one automation part and then having to switch to be able to kind of copy and take different automation settings is a pretty essential workflow thing. All right, so we see Roland stuff is sick in bed, but he's not so sick that he couldn't hit the like button from his phone. So we hope you feel better. Get well. So. All right, so we see Suede TV just asks, is there a difference recording between 48K versus 44.1K? So I don't think anyone would notice between the two of them. So I would say if something doesn't sound good, it's not the sample rate's fault. All right, so we see Best Korean Jesus has joined us from San Diego. Great to see you on. All right, so Audiophonic says, I'm new to Halion. How do you do a quick demo on how to load some new samples to make an instrument? Can you sample in Halion, or do you need to do this in Cubase and export samples? Yeah, you could sample directly inside of Halion. So let's say if I wanted to add a Halion here. See if we can get this in. All right, so let's say we go to Halion 7. All right, so we'll just go to our advanced settings. So I'm just going to take an audio file. Let's see. So let's say I want to take maybe this vocal. And then if I just drag it over and we go to like the mapping area, that we can just come over here. So we say, let's go to edit mapping. And then you could just play that. But also when we want to go into Halion, you could just basically sidechain right in. Let me see if I could open up this project quickly. All right, so now I have Halion open. We could just go to kind of like the sample page. So when we come over here, we could just say we want to go to the recorder. I could come over. We could choose when it does MIDI note on, MIDI note off. So let's say I have Halion here. We could now, I could just hit the note. So I have the side chain set up here. So we're just side chain from this instrument or group. And now when we come over here, we can see that all of our instruments, when we just want to come over to the mapping, there's all the notes that we just sampled. So you could sample directly into Halion. All right, so with that, we are just out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I'll cover some of the stuff that I flaked on today on Friday's live stream, hopefully. We'll figure out, especially see if I could get the detect silence as well as the modulation matrix. But with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Everyone have a great day, stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on Friday. Goodbye.